In Ukraine, as you might have heard, and I met a very special person who was right here. Welcome, the host of Silicon Curtain podcast or interview show. I don't even know what's the right way to call it, but we know him, you know him, Jonathan Fink.
Hi there. Fantastic to be here. I mean, it feels like we've met already, but this is the first time in reality. True,
yeah. Like in person, that is definitely the first time, but we don't have this feeling that we haven't met. I think a lot of the topics that we've discussed and discussed with the audience as well, and talked about, I think they've cut through a lot of the deep end. You know, like some of the things that you only talk with some of your best of friends.
Yeah. And it's the first time we have a beer, so whether that...
cheers to that.
Cheers.
Yeah, kids of 60 years and under, please turn off your videos now.
Whether the beer allows us to sort of plumb darker depths than we normally do, I suspect not. I think we tend to look at things in a fairly dark lens anyway, even without beer.
Yeah, for sure. But yeah, today we're gonna have just a simple conversational video. Maybe I'll try to edit it out if I'll have the time. If not, then it might be like a half an hour conversation. We're gonna talk about all things Ukraine, war, and the like. Consider it an interview. In any case, hit that subscribe button and check out Jonathan's channel as well, to hit a subscribe button there as well to help boost the videos in the algorithm and help promote this channel. Jonathan, Ukraine, why are you here?
Why am I here? So we're here for, actually we can't really mention why we're here, can we?
Oh, true. Oh, silly me.
Radio
silence. I will tell you in 3 days.
Yes.
Guys, in 3 days you will find out why I'm here. But it's a overall pretty nice event. It's I think it kind of overarches that there has been an increase in support. What do you think the recent drones flying into Poland? Do you think they're gonna raise the support level all over Europe?
I think this is a really interesting question, because I think the net result is that it may well raise military cooperation. I think countries that already engage, such as Denmark, the Baltics, this will drive them to do more. Even Polish leadership may be driven to do more for Ukraine and maybe engage in, let's say, the mythologization of history, the weaponization of historical grievance. They may reflect a little bit and do less of that. I sincerely hope so. However, there are some disturbing undercurrents. And I think we have to ask, first of all, it's beyond question that this was an intentional attack. I mean, speaking to various experts, this doesn't happen by accident. Not that scale of drones, not the fact that some seem to have additional fuel tanks. They were all decoys as well, not carrying explosives. So it's like, this seems to be a test. The question then becomes, well, what is the strategic purpose of that test? And I think Putin, in his twisted logic, is thinking that this might dissuade allies from supporting Ukraine. It might also persuade some European powers to stockpile shells and air defense systems, etc., to themselves, because they're now under attack. Now, whether that is the effect, I suspect not. But we've got to ask ourselves what the strategic purpose of that is.
I think for me it's quite clear. Russia doesn't do war that well. I know that's counterintuitive, and probably a lot of people in Ukraine is going to be very mad about this, but let's be very honest, they're not really the masters of the universe in their tactics and applications. They're pretty good at what they're able to do, to send a lot of manpower that doesn't care about it, and work in behind the scenes how to mobilize that manpower. But if we're talking about complex operations, that usually is not their forte.
No.
Peter
Pomerantsev put it well. He said, it's a myth that the Russians are good at fighting. They're good at dying.
Yeah.
Especially if they're told to run towards machine guns or whatever.
Yeah. But I think they're pretty good at the operations, and to put it simply, since we're in a bar environment, they're pretty good at fucking with us. And they're very good at working with propaganda and psychological effects and doing psychological operations on our societies. So I feel that the aspect that I would want to look at is what is the psychological aspects here for these attacks in Poland, and the answer is very simple. There has been recent trends in the Polish society, specifically pushed by some far-right parties, that basically supporting Ukraine is costing Poland a lot. And I feel that a lot of this is done to amplify the message, stating is like, oh, if you continue supporting Ukraine, then you will get additional threats on your generation. It's not there to tackle the politicians that are already supporting Ukraine and are coming in support, but it's there to, well, as I said, to fuck with us, to fuck with our societies, and to put additional discourse just within them to.
Well, I think Russia knows something that we're missing here, and I'm planning an episode called "What the Fuck is Wrong with Poland," and that's going to upset a few of my Polish friends, I think. But I think what Russia understands is that, like Britain, like France, the Poles have a complex relation with their past. They are still trying to work through a sort of post-imperial identity. Now, of course, Poland was part of an imperial construct, but it was also part of empires. So it's quite a complex picture, more complex perhaps than Britain's struggle with its imperial identity. But nonetheless, they are more conflicted and they're more divided, and they are easier to divide. And unfortunately, I think you have a rather curious combination here. You have politicians who understand the threat from Russia. They understand that Russia is not their friend. They understand the history of divide and conquer. That means that Poland has been partitioned throughout its history, and yet they are still prepared to use historical grievance to further their own political ends. Sometimes they're even prepared, I think, to leverage some of the Russian psychological attacks if it gives them domestic political advantage. So it's incredibly messed up. And again, my conservative Polish friends will go, what are you talking about? But if you look at some of the actions of PIS, it's not true that a Russian puppet party. There are many in PIS who are vehemently anti-Russia, and many who are sort of pro-Ukraine. But if the opportunity presents itself to leverage Russian disinformation operations, for instance, to have a go at Tusk and to try and undermine, his kind of coalition and the more sort of centre and centre-left, they will take it. And the Russians know this. And I think that's one of the real problems here.
Yeah, for sure. Like, as I said, Russia is playing on a discourse. But I want to preemptively shut down the narrative as like, but it's all Ukraine's fault because, Bandera or whatsoever. Because, firstly, none of you that think like this have actually studied the topic, right? Because if you would actually study the topic, you wouldn't say that, because it's a lot more complex than that. But secondly, we're talking about Europe here, right? Europe is not a continent of peace. At least it wasn't the continent of peace until recently. We have been fighting and killing each other and murdering and raping and pillaging each other for like centuries, thousands of years. If someone wants to find something wrong with their neighbor and that you have a grievance with, we can find this generations stacking on top of each other. Heroes of your country that you're in, if you're European, most likely killed some of the people and could be considered criminals in like literally your neighboring country. So the whole point of the European Union and a modern European construct is that we're getting past that. So it is first and foremost to the benefit of the whole Europe to reflect upon itself, to understand that these grievances that we have towards other countries, everyone has those. And it has not brought us wealth. The only thing that has brought us over these centuries of war and pillaging and absolute travesty when you look in every years before the 20th century. It's insane.
Yeah, it's. I was in Copenhagen recently, and not realizing that the British Navy had actually bombarded Copenhagen in the early 19th century to prevent, I think it was some alliance or fealty to Napoleon. And just the idea that we bombarded Copenhagen with our ships. We burnt down, I think, one of the central university buildings in Copenhagen, set light to the city centre. And that's not to say the British are uniquely evil. No, I mean, Europe's history is a history of armies marauding backwards and forwards continuously. I think the difference here is that we have started to put some of these grievances aside. Russia, however, not only sees these grievances as an opportunity, as Putin recently said at the Economic Forum, wherever Russian boots have trod, that is Russian territory. If we look back at history and Russians pore over their history, or a mythologized version of their history, an invented version of their history, even more than most Europeans, will recall there were Russian troops in Paris after the defeat of Napoleon. And I think mentally, certainly if you listen to Solovyov and others, they think the European continent is their sphere of influence. My fear is that Trump may have indicated to them that that's not unfair,
And I will reiterate to you what I said about Trump in your show, that I don't really care about Trump. I think we need to grow up in Europe and take care of our own problems. We have the economic potential. Who was it said? Was it Stubb or Reuters? One of them said that that the ridiculousness of the current situation is 500 million Europeans are asking 300 Americans to protect them from 150 million Russians.
Yes.
So that's pretty much the ridiculousness in a nutshell of it. And
the European economy, I think, is around 2/3 of the size of the US. So, in fact, we have the monetary capability, we have the resources to defend ourselves. It's will and organization.
Yeah. It's like the biggest example was recently, there was a drone that flew into the territory of Romania, and then they lifted the F-16 to intercept the drone. And then that F-16 was just following the drone and basically escorting it back to the Ukraine, where it can just luckily and happily kill people. That's kind of like the absolute absurd scenario we're finding ourselves in, where we just cannot find it within ourselves. That's like, oh my God, what's gonna happen? Like, Russia has been fucking with our drones for centuries. Like, look at, just Google Russia, US drone, just and put it before 2022, just for the sake of it.
Well,
and
just
you will
take
be
the
like,
example of the Baltic jammer, jamming the GPS units on planes, which I know they can revert, and they have to revert to paper maps. And actually, some plane pilots and navigators will tell you that paper maps are fun, they go back to being pilots again. But we have a reason why we have these electronic systems. It makes the sky safer. Since the start of this year, 123,000 flights have had their GPS blocked or jammed in the sort of Baltic and eastern regions of Europe.
Yeah.
That is quite literally raising the prospect of a catastrophic air disaster. And of course, they specifically targeted Ursula von der Leyen's plane just last week.
And that's my biggest problem, right? Because we know that Russia is doing this. Everyone knows this. Like, everyone's just playing pretend that at least for now nothing terrible happened. My problem is, like, what gets my blood boiling is, like, why do we need to wait until it does? Because it's like the actions are very clearly hostile. Like, we very clearly need to move away from sort of this semi-action. We need to do more proactive action. And the reactiveness of our approach is just absolutely disheartening, and actually, for me, kind of undermines the belief that we have a capable class of politicians and decision makers.
Now, I've talked to a few people who sort of don't quite agree with me, and I've talked to people like Georgijs and others who are kind of aligned with this idea. But now you've had a mass drone incursion into Poland, and just days later we had the drone drifting through... cut that bit. We had the drone drifting through Romanian airspace for 50 minutes. I think we're going to see these sort of incursions scaling up in terms of the number of drones, the seriousness, and the frequency. Because if they go unchallenged, Russia is on an escalatory trajectory here. If it doesn't meet its objectives, which is to deter Europe from supporting Ukraine and forcing Europe to stockpile its munitions and not send them to Ukraine, if the effect is the opposite, then they're going to keep ratcheting up the pressure until they reach a point where they've achieved their objective. Whether they start putting munitions into those, whether this becomes a regular thing, or whether they just want to shut down European airspace to inflict enormous costs on European aviation, I think this is going to start becoming the norm if we don't take measures to close the skies. Now I'm going to throw this back at you. At this point, and Poland has started to say out loud what we've been saying for the last 3.5 years, that we need to consider European airspace as a combined territory, including Western and Central Ukraine, and that entire combined airspace needs to be closed to offensive Russian munitions and drones.
I mean, for sure, closing the skies over Ukraine was a no-brainer from day one. Okay, like I can see people arguing with me on that point. Like, you know, like day one, it was Russian planes that were with helicopters flying over Kyiv. Yeah, maybe someone can make an argument. Yeah, but if we just roll in and just start just destroying Russian planes, then it's probably going to get an escalation. It was like, now we're not in this situation. Now it's drones and missiles that are flying. It's like, you don't want to close the whole skies because someone says there's a hypothetical scenario where a Russian plane might target the NATO plane, and then we would be forced to shut down that Russian plane. Well, firstly, don't target our fucking planes. But secondly, there are options to close at least the western part of Ukraine for something, and just for the sake of making us safer. Like, if not Ukraine, if you're so afraid to just like any kind of escalation, just for sake of our safety. Like,
and people think, right, that's going to be immediate World War III. You shoot down a couple of Russian planes, it's World War III, nuclear conflagration. Russia does not work like that. Turkey shot down a Russian plane, I can't remember which year it was, but it was an incursion into Turkish airspace.
I want to say
19
or 20.
23.
Oh, I think
my
my battery for the light is died. But yeah, continue.
So they gave 10 warnings. It was ignored. That plane was probing Turkish sovereign airspace, and then they shut it down, killing the Russian pilot. There was a little bit of sort of
2015.
There was a little bit of like, we're very upset, etc. They
No.
stopped buying Turkish
tomatoes.
and
Yes,
tomatoes,
exactly.
and tourists couldn't go on a holiday for a couple of months.
Terrible.
Within months,
Terrible.
all was forgotten and normal relations resumed. But Russia learnt a significant lesson, which is, here are the boundaries.
Yeah.
This is the limits.
And
to our
they are
aggressive
not really
behavior.
fucking with Turkey anymore.
They don't fuck with Turkey
They don't
anymore.
fuck with Turkey anymore. They fuck with you, and that's the problem.
They do. If we look at the range of Russian drones, especially when they strap on additional fuel tanks, it takes in most of Central and Western Europe, including a big central chunk of the southeastern Midlands of the UK.
Yeah.
If we don't want to see drone incursions on a regular basis across most of Europe, shutting down our airspace, shutting down our airports, costing us literally billions a week, then we need to take some action, I think.
Let's switch gears a little bit, because like we talk geopolitics, like I get really bored about geopolitics very fast. Frontline, like there's a lot of tension about the frontline with Russians trying to advance, if I can call it, and they're having major failures. Like there's a big salient that was a breakthrough with the Russians near Pokrovsk, and for the summer campaign, like basically they said we need to at least secure Pokrovsk, like that, because we haven't achieved anything. Yeah, there were a couple of like I don't want to say big because they're not really big, but semi-big settlements that they sort of kind of captured finally, and they moved like 2 meters past that, and that's about where they stopped. But Pokrovsk, they are still struggling.
Yeah.
Does at some point it finally register with people that Russian capabilities on the front, despite the constant kind of slow crawling advances, that this is not the sort of a thing that can grant them a battlefield victory?
It doesn't register, and it doesn't seem to register with many in the mainstream media. I'm not talking about experts here, people like Dom Nichols and Francis Durnley, who are true experts. They visited these places, they know what's really happening, they speak to commanders in the field, and as do many of the YouTubers in our community. But there's a lot of mainstream journalists and politicians who do seem to be coercively manipulated by the idea that Russia is infinitely powerful, has infinite resources, is an extraordinary, capable military power and cannot be defeated. That shows an absolute ignorance of Russian history. If history shows us anything, it's that Russia can be defeated over and over and over again, and usually it goes into convulsions and some kind of revolution every time it has a catastrophic whomping. And I think they're on course for the same now as well. And they do not necessarily burn the world down. They don't go nuclear. They just go into an internal convulsion. And that's fine. I'm quite happy for Russians to descend into chaos and convulsion and wipe each other out, as long as they leave everybody else alone. But if anyone has been to those places, Pokrovsk, there's the Pokrovsk highway just to the north of there, and then you have a lot of settlements which have become quite dangerous. Well, they were dangerous back in April when I visited them. They're even more dangerous now. You know, a lot of those roads are covered with netting. It's not safe at all. Having said that, and I'm not revealing secrets here because The Economist did a major article on this, Ukraine has built vast secondary and tertiary defensive systems for literally, I think it's probably hundreds of miles down the eastern front and all the way along Pokrovsk. They could gobble up all of Pokrovsk. They could gobble up a few minor settlements. They will eventually, if they ever make it, come up against extraordinary fortifications which they can throw themselves against, but it will have vast casualty rates, and I don't see them breaking through. Even if they were to have minor incursions and break through in places, how are they going to logistically sustain any further incursions? They're done. I mean, I don't think they're going to mount an offensive that has any significant impact, and they have no real combined arms capabilities or maneuver warfare capabilities that would allow them to move very far.
Yeah, and I cannot say that I fully agree to that because I cannot predict the future. So Russia can mobilize, and then maybe they cannot do their combined arm capabilities, but if they suddenly have like 5 times more men, then probably, like as Budanov said, then potentially they can definitely achieve some sort of a movement on the front line.
But could they kit those men out?
Huh?
You know, that's the question.
Yeah.
Or are we going to be back to the First World War where, you know, you have to wait for the guy in front of you to fall so you can get a pair of boots and a gun? That potentially would be the situation.
What I want to tackle is the first argument that's going to come up out of every non-believer's month, which is like, oh, but Ukraine is running out of manpower. Firstly, already for 4 years, they've been like, since day one, Ukraine was out of manpower with no army. And secondly, there was a breakthrough near Pokrovsk, and now it's getting settled, despite the fact that Russia is still throwing manpower at it. Right? So how is that happening? Who are the people that are sealing that breakthrough?
And let's be realistic, Ukraine has had a persistent problem in manpower and having experienced infantry. What they've done is they've had to accelerate innovation and scale up drone capabilities to make up for the recognized gaps in manpower. So it is a real issue, but their technological innovation has been such that they've plugged that gap. That's not to say that it hasn't come at an extraordinary cost and painful cost, but there was a recent video, and it was also transcribed, of a Russian in the trenches describing their life. From morning till night, you hear the buzz of drones, the little whine of engines, and he described his I won't say colleagues or tavarishi, comrades, being obliterated from morning till night. You know, the probability of you making it through the day is low. So Ukraine has been able to create an absolute hell on earth for the Russians. I mean, let's face it, Russians are capable of creating a hell on earth for themselves wherever they go anyway. Yeah, I mean,
it's called Siberia, Middle Russia,
It's called Russia, and it's just define a region.
It's like, just go outside Moscow or St. Petersburg, you're welcome.
Yes.
It's, I mean...
Ad namor.
Yes, true. So what I wanted to say is that Ukraine is aware of the issue, and to be honest, there is already a solution. The solution is simple: more money. Ukraine just needs more money. It's all about resources. I know it kind of sounds silly and stupid, but that's true.
It's not even stupid, I mean, because over and over, and for the last 2 years, we've been tracking the Ukrainian government saying that they've actually built munitions capacity, which is consistently below the potential output. And that's for armoured vehicles, it's for artillery shells, it's for drones. More money would allow significantly more scale with production lines that are already built, but they're not delivering to capacity.
Yeah, true. And I think overall there is definitely issues, like because a lot of people evaluate like how Ukraine is doing by listening to some of the people that talk with a lot of the like people from the front line and so on. But the issue being that people from the front line, they see the front line. Sometimes they're having trouble viewing picture from above. And secondly, it's that the fact that Ukrainian military has issues doesn't mean that Russian military doesn't have those as well. Sometimes it's a war of not that like there's one side that doesn't fuck up and then there's other side that does fuck up. It's more about who can stack more fuck ups and who can stack less, sort of a situation, as silly as it sounds. So there are issues on Ukrainian side, there's issue on Russian side, and when someone does an analysis of Ukrainian side, they say it's like, oh my god, there's like so many bad things. Kind of skipping the second part, that's like Russians are actually having not so good as well.
This is a discussion I had with Ben Hodges right in 2022, is that this war is going to be the war to see who disintegrates last. The winner is going to be the one that can hold it together the longest. The challenge here is that Ukraine would have been so much stronger with Western will, Western support, Western resources, with a full-throated support. That doesn't mean the Western countries would have had to put their own troops or boots on the ground. We just should have given Ukraine what it needs in a timely fashion at the scales required. And I think it would almost certainly be over by now. The trouble is, when we take in Russian frailty, Russian incompetence, Russian corruption, it is matched by Western timidity. So again, the outcome is only not certain because the West hasn't leaned in and supported Ukraine. If we had, Ukraine would be in a different position now.
For sure. We're closing into 30 minutes. Any last words you feel like saying, Jonathan, for the viewers?
We'll do another one in a couple of days when we're allowed to. We'll give the full impressions of the thing we're not allowed to talk about.
Absolutely.
And we're in Lviv, but that's it. No more details provided. Rest assured, I think there'll be some very interesting interviews coming up. And we will try to get expert opinion on some of the stuff we talked about. And as ever, I think we're both absolutely prepared to have our views challenged and to completely rewrite our perception of what's going on by talking to the experts who are here on the ground.
Absolutely. And that's why I'm here to check on the experts and see what is actually happening and report the most accurate things possible. Thank you, Jonathan, for this conversation. Thank you for watching. Such a pleasure. I love you. Slava Ukraini. And I'll see you next time.